Somerton Beach, 1948. A man lies dead, perfectly dressed, facing the early morning waves. No wallet, no ID, no explanation. Only a tiny scrap of paper tucked into his pocket. 2 words, Tamam Shud. It is finished. This cryptic phrase begins a trail of real-life mysteries. 3 cases across 3 continents, all connected by the eerie power of written words. Words that may decide life or death. Words that may whisper across decades, influencing events beyond comprehension. Some call it coincidence, others call it fate. And a few quietly wonder, are these the echoes of a real-life death note? We like to believe that every mystery has a key, a detail that unlocks the truth. But every so often a story surfaces that refuses to open. It stays shut, silent, watching as if waiting for us to notice it, or to ignore it forever. It began that December morning when a man walking his dog noticed the figure on the seawall. At first glance, he seemed asleep, perfectly posed, as though admiring the waves. But when police arrived, they realized he was gone. No signs of violence, no labels on his clothing, no record of his existence. Every detail carefully removed, as if someone had authored the scene, leaving only one deliberate, haunting message. It is finished. The phrase came from a rare collection of poems, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a book about life, death, and fate. Investigators searched the city until they found a copy of the book lying in the backseat of an abandoned car. Its final page had been torn out. In that gap, the missing fragment fit perfectly. On the inside cover, someone had scribbled a string of letters, grouped like a cipher. Virgo Bab Dimlayowai Wit Bimpanet. 5 lines of nonsense, or something far more deliberate. Even the best code breakers of the day couldn't make sense of it. A phone number written nearby led to a young nurse living not far from the beach. She admitted once owning a copy of the same book, then fell silent, trembling, refusing to say more. When police showed her the man's plaster bust, she reportedly turned pale, as if she had seen a ghost, and whispered, "I don't want to talk about it." Decades passed, yet every attempt to identify him failed. His fingerprints matched no records. His dental work matched no charts. His belongings told no story. Just a ticket stub, an unlit cigarette, and that impossible scrap of paper declaring an ending. For some, the case became a Cold War spy tale. For others, something darker, a message meant to close a life already written. Every theory came back to the same unsettling detail, the precision. Nothing accidental, no chaos, everything in perfect order, as though someone had authored the scene. When researchers later re-examined the cipher under ultraviolet light, they saw faint indentations of another attempt beneath the visible letters, as if the writer had changed their mind mid-sentence. Like someone revising a paragraph before sealing another person's fate, and that phrase, Tamam Shud. It sounds peaceful, but on that scrap it reads like a verdict. It is finished, not he is finished, not it was finished, simply it, the end of something unnamed. Even now, 70 years later, no one can say who the Somerton man was, why he died, or who wrote those final words. But the image remains, a lifeless man, immaculate clothes, a torn fragment declaring completion. As if the universe itself had signed off the last line of a chapter only it understood. Some mysteries fade with time. This one deepened. Every new clue only confirmed what people feared from the start, that someone, somewhere, had written an ending, and the ink had never dried. There are places in this world where gravity doesn't seem to follow the same rules, where reason bends, just slightly out of shape. One of those places lies on the edge of Dumbarton, Scotland, a stone bridge built in the 1890s that locals call Overtoun Bridge. By all appearances, it's ordinary, a gentle arch over a quiet ravine, framed by the rolling green of the Scottish countryside. But anyone who lives nearby knows the stories. For more than 70 years, dogs have been leaping from that bridge, the same side, the same spot, as if pulled by an invisible hand. It started in the 1950s. A family crossing the bridge would pause to take in the view, and suddenly, without warning, Their dog would sprint forward, leap over the parapet, and fall 40 feet to the rocks below. Sometimes the animals survived, only to claw their way back up and try to jump again, always in the same direction, always between the two final parapets on the right-hand side. The pattern was so precise it terrified people. More than 50 dogs over the years. No predator below, no strange smell, no sound to provoke them. Just a quiet moment, then a decision that defied everything their owners knew about instinct. Eventually, newspapers began calling it the Dog Suicide Bridge. And like all good folklore, whispers soon followed. That the land beneath Overtoun was cursed, that the bridge marked a thin place between worlds, that those who crossed with heavy hearts risked being pulled toward something waiting beyond sight. But the strangest part of all wasn't discovered until much later. In the 1990s, while clearing out the attic of the nearby Overtoun house, an old estate once used for the bridge's caretakers, a local historian found a small collection of yellowed notes tied together with string, each one written in shaky handwriting, each one unsigned. They were written decades apart, yet all contained fragments of the same recurring line. They hear it too. One note described, "The whisper from the stones." Another, "The call is strongest in the mist." And the final note, brittle, nearly illegible, ended with a phrase scrawled in ink that had soaked through the paper. Tamam Shud. Investigators dismissed it as coincidence, someone referencing the Australian mystery for poetic effect. But locals didn't see it that way. Because long before those notes were found, several dog owners had reported something similar. Not just the strange pull, but the sound. A low hum, like wind moving through hollow wood. And when they turned toward it, their dogs would tense, ears forward, eyes fixed on the arch, the same one where the others had jumped. Over the years, priests blessed the bridge, psychics held seances, and scientists measured for magnetic anomalies. They all left with the same answer: nothing. Nothing measurable, nothing rational. And yet the pattern never stopped. The truth is, Overtoun doesn't feel malevolent. It feels patient, as though something ancient waits beneath it, not to harm, but to test. Something that listens when you approach, weighing the quiet contents of your soul. And maybe those who carry invisible burdens hear that whisper most clearly. That's why locals say, if you ever visit Overtoun Bridge, don't linger too long. Don't stare over the edge. And if you must cross, cross without thinking. Because some bridges aren't built to take you somewhere new. They're built to remind you what waits if you don't. Far across the Atlantic, in the quiet deserts of New Jersey, another story begins. One that blends science, obsession, and the strange pull of the unknown. It is the story of Ong's hat. In the 1980s, a set of manuscripts began appearing in academic libraries and, eventually, on the fledgling internet. They claimed to describe secret experiments in interdimensional travel, the manipulation of consciousness, and a series of devices designed to open doors to other realities. Among these documents was repeated reference to a device called the egg, a contraption that supposedly allowed a person's awareness to project itself beyond the body to observe and perhaps influence distant places. The manuscripts were technical on the surface, filled with schematics, calculations, and diagrams. But beneath the formulas were warnings, subtle, almost imperceptible, as if hidden in plain sight. Some who read the full manuscripts reported feelings of disorientation, dizziness, and a creeping sense that the documents were watching them back. And then the disappearances began. Researchers who had investigated the origins of the manuscripts failed to report back. Those who returned claimed that knowledge itself had a cost, that the act of reading, of understanding, of observing, could pull one closer to the edge of something far larger and darker than human comprehension. Odd details emerged. Symbols on the pages seemed to shift when unobserved, letters rearranging themselves subtly between readings. Computers crashed inexplicably when certain passages were accessed. Entire paragraphs became corrupted. The manuscripts earned a whispered nickname among those who dared to talk about them: the book that shouldn't be read. Some dismissed the Ong's Hat manuscripts as hoaxes, clever pranks for the emerging online community. Yet for those who studied them closely, The effect was undeniable. The documents felt alive, not in the literal sense, but in the way a predator waits for the perfect moment. The words seemed to carry intent, as if ink and paper could influence more than mere thoughts. Like a death note, they reminded anyone who dared approach that knowledge could carry consequences far beyond comprehension. 3 continents, 3 eras, 3 stories. What connects them? First, the Somerton man, whose life ended with the faint phrase, "It is finished," scrawled on a tiny scrap of paper. Second, the Overtown bridge notes, whispered across decades, pulling lives toward unseen forces. Third, the Ong's Hat manuscripts, documents that seem to punish curiosity itself. At their core, each story revolves around words with power, written words, carefully chosen, carrying intention, words that shape events in ways unseen. Some call it coincidence, others call it fate, and some quietly wonder if these are merely human attempts to rationalize forces we cannot understand. Yet the most unnerving possibility is the simplest, that words when written might carry weight far beyond what we imagine. Not metaphorical weight, literal weight. And perhaps, just perhaps, some of those words were written to determine the lives of others. The death note of legend may be fiction, but its echoes resonate in the real world. When you think about it, every diary, every note left in a drawer, every page scrawled with intention, has the potential to change the course of a life. And sometimes, history leaves behind traces of those notes, fragments of intention, reminders that the line between the ordinary and the extraordinary is thinner than we believe. So the next time you stumble across a scrap of paper in an old book, or read something that sends a chill down your spine, remember the Somerton man, the Overtown bridge, and Ong's Hat. Remember that knowledge has its price, that words can carry unseen consequences, and that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They are meant to watch, and to remind us how little we control in a world that writes its own ending. Because the truth is far stranger and far darker than fiction. And sometimes, reality is a death note. Reality is, some say the truth sets us free, others know it never lets go. The stories you've heard tonight are all real. Every name, every place, every impossible detail. Only the silence between them has been filled. Remember, the death note isn't always a book. Sometimes it's a phrase, a place, or a thought you can't unhear. This world writes its own endings, and maybe, just maybe, we're only ever reading the next page.